What's up? It's Tom. Thanks for being here. We're going to talk about the possibility of the Twins trading some of their top prospects. I know this is a pretty prospect-focused channel. I'm a prospect guy, but sometimes you got to cash out. Sometimes, not all these guys pan out, and sometimes you look really good by trading some of these players, and, other times it looks really, really bad. So it's a dangerous game to play. I think there's good reason why, for example, at this past year's trade deadline, not a single top 100 prospect was dealt across all of baseball. So I think teams are a little scared to pull off big prospect trades sometimes because, again, they can look really bad. But let's go down that direction. This idea came to me, this top talking point. Basically, I was looking through this great article from Aaron Gleeman at The Athletic showing the 9 most likely Twins players to be shopped, so major league pieces to be shopped this offseason. Recommend you to go look at this list. I was originally going to react to this list and throw my 2 cents in, but I thought, you know what, let's pivot and do something completely different. I'm curious what your thoughts are on whether you'd prefer the Twins to deal some of their current major leaguers, their core guys, to kind of maybe mix things up in the clubhouse, get a little bit of a different look. Also clearing some salary as well on some of these players that Aaron has mentioned in his list. Or if you'd rather see them trade from the prospect pool and try to bring in some more MLB talent that way. And keeping in mind with the Twins payroll constrictions, we're not going to be able to trade these prospects I'm going to throw out for guys who have big salaries. So it'd be, maybe guys who are younger. And I think I'll do a follow-up video on this and point out some of the guys in that category of players who I think could fit on the Twins. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. And then I'm also want to make sure to point out the guys I'm about to mention as potential trade chips. It is not as if I'm looking at these guys and saying, well, I don't think they're going to be that good. Actually, it's quite the opposite. I'm looking at these guys and I'm thinking other teams are going to find value in these guys. So this is complimentary, if nothing else. If you don't keep up with the channel a ton, if you're not familiar with some of these names, I'm not going to get into a big backstory or a big scouting report on any of these guys. So keep that in mind. If you're curious, hey, like this video and subscribe to the channel, and you'll know these guys really well because these are all guys who I have in my top 10 of my Twins prospects. These handful of guys, 5 guys, and I'm even going to talk about why I didn't include the other 5 guys. Starting kind of from the bottom of my top 10, CJ Culpepper is the first guy we're going to talk about here. He really had a nice end of the season. He missed a lot of time this season, but he has a great foundation to work with. I think some organizations would really love to get a hold of CJ Culpepper and tinker with him and have a really good time. There's a lot of upside. This is a really athletic guy who throws 6 different pitches, and maybe you're going to have to narrow that down, but that's a pretty fun starting point for another organization to be thinking about. He had a lack of innings this past season and a forearm strain. He missed a lot of time. He did make it back from that, but that's just maybe kind of cloud some things for him. But yeah, again, he's my number 10 prospect, and I think a lot of orgs would be excited to get him, but the Twins have a lot of other right-handed, in particular, starting pitchers, even from this exact same draft class. This is the Zebby Matthews, Andrew Morris, Corey Lewis draft class. That also includes Connor Prialup, the lefty. It seems weird to talk about this, but the Twins do have a good amount of pitching depth, starting pitching depth, either that is made in the major leagues like David Festa and Zebby Matthews, or is right on the cusp. Guys like CJ Culpepper. And I think this is a guy who could be really marketable to another organization. Staying with the pitching, Marco Raya, yet another guy who spent most of his time in AA but did make his AAA debut at the end of the year. Very talented arm with a starter's array of pitches. There's really no question about his talent and his pitch mix. But the big question is, can this guy actually handle a starter's load? He only threw 80 pitches in one of his 25 starts last season, 70 or more pitches in just 7 of 25 starts. So this guy, yes, he's a starting pitcher. He stayed healthy all year, but it's not like he's been on really a traditional starting pitcher's path. On the silver lining, you could have said a lot of that stuff about David Festa a year ago, and he really stepped it up in terms of making himself into a starting pitcher who was able to go through outings and get through innings. So maybe that's the future for Marco Raya. And again, I think maybe the Twins have some confidence that they know what they're doing with him. That, someone like me from the outside looking in looks at this stuff and is wondering what they're doing. But there is still that gap. There is still that gap that he has to navigate of getting to the point where he can throw every 5 days and throw potentially around 100 pitches every 5 days. And I think that's a big step. That's a big enough step to where I think you open yourself up to putting him out there, dangling him out there to see what teams are thinking. And again, this is another player that other teams are going to look at and be like, yeah, it's pretty easy to envision this guy being a top of the rotation starter. We're all about this. They're not slam dunks. But again, I want to stress, these are very talented guys. It's not that I don't believe in these guys, but I think the path is kind of a little murky. And you could say that to some degree on every prospect, but Kalen Culpepper is my next guy I want to call out. The Twins' most recent first-round draft pick. They've done this before. They traded Chase Petty the winter after they drafted him. So this is a move that they've done before. It kind of feels like the Twins got in early on him, to be honest. A lot of the draft reports on him I don't think match who he is now, because he made a swing adjustment in the College World Series. And then I think he has really taken steps forward as a defensive shortstop. On draft day, I'll be honest, I thought this was kind of a reach. And as I've watched Kalen Culpepper more and more, the more I understood, okay, this is what they saw in him. His perceived value has increased from draft day, is what I'm trying to say. If you look at his numbers in Cedar Rapids, they're really not eye-popping. He played really well in Fort Myers. But then, you got to take into account long season. Guy's been through a lot. So a lot of these draftees kind of run out of gas as the year goes on. But I think this is a guy who's interesting. Talking about that kind of bigger picture perspective, we talked about there's so many options that the Twins have in the high minors in the rotation. This middle infield picture is pretty crowded. The Twins obviously are, if we're assuming that all of the MLB pieces stay in this conversation, Carlos Correa is not going anywhere for a long time. Royce Lewis isn't going anywhere for a long time. Brooks Lee isn't going anywhere for a long time. Edouard Julien factors into that conversation. Yeah, second base needs to get figured out, but I kind of have Brooks Lee penciled in as the guy whose kind of spot that is. I realize the Twins are having some conversations about potentially moving Royce Lewis to second base. And again, there's other options. Austin Martin plays some second base, there's a bunch of other options in the org there. So I think you could trade a guy like Kalen Culpepper and say, hey, when we look into the future, it's kind of hard to find a pathway for an infielder right now. So we're going to flip this guy to get a piece that we don't currently have. Again, I really like Kalen Culpepper, though. I really like what I saw out of him. Really excited to see what he does. Moving on to my next guy, Luke Kershaw, one of the biggest breakout prospects in all of baseball last season. Rated the number 39 overall prospect in baseball by Baseball America. I am a believer, but this is a huge jump, and if other teams value him as high as that Baseball America ranking, I think he's more like 70th in the MLB Pipeline one, but either way, a top 100 prospect from a guy who did not have that profile a year ago now. And he did not have a fully healthy season. He didn't get to play in the field a ton because he had an elbow injury, was able to play through that, but he had to get Tommy John. That was known for a while. So they eventually shut him down, with the timeline being that he'll be healthy for this coming season. So that kind of muddies up the possibility of whether another team would want to trade for him, seeing as that he's currently recovering from Tommy John. Yes, an injured player, trading for an injured player would be probably kind of weird if you're thinking about this from another team, but I don't think there's a whole lot of clouds around him due to that injury. As you see here, he's in the Futures game gear. He was the Twins representative in the Futures game. Again, one of the biggest breakout prospects in all of baseball. I can't comment much on his defense because he didn't play in the field that much this year. He primarily DH due to that injury, but they had him play some second, and they had him play some center field, which is interesting. But kind of a lot of the things I just said about Kalen Culpepper, we can say about Luke Kershaw in terms of the infield picture. If we look into the outfield picture, again, it seems almost unfair to say this because I haven't seen him there a ton, but I just have a hard time believing he can be a true defensive center fielder. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe I'll be eating those words months from now when we're watching him. But I think it's more likely he would fit in like in left field. And the Twins have a lot of corner outfielders too, and both in the major leagues and the minor leagues. So again, a crowded situation. This is saying more about kind of the Twins' current depth, current foundation on the major league club, to where you could look at Luke Kershaw and say, is there really going to be space for him when he's ready? Maybe. Injuries are hard to predict. There is always injuries, as we well know as Twins fans. So great guy to have around. But if you can flip him for a piece or multiple pieces that you feel like you need more or that complement your roster better, I could see that making sense. But again, another player guy I really like, and I believe in, is Emmanuel Rodriguez, the number 14 prospect in all of baseball for Baseball America. So I'm looking at this in terms of we're getting number 14 overall prospect in baseball value. We are getting a star player if we are dealing Emmanuel Rodriguez, because I think there is definitely a path for him to be a star. But even I, as a big believer and a big enjoyer of this guy, both as a player and a person, I have to acknowledge the risk. There is a lot of swing and miss, and he's been injured a lot. Incredible plate discipline. The bat is crazy quick, but he has a lot of swing and miss. Even though he is great at identifying the strike zone, he swings and misses at a lot of balls in the zone. And it has not hurt him that much. I will say that much. His numbers are incredible in the minor leagues, but there's a reason why there's people who have a lot of questions about him. You can envision him having some issues potentially in the big leagues. So I think there's enough question to where I wouldn't take this off the table. I have to keep Emmanuel Rodriguez as a potential trade chip on the table, even though it makes me feel bad in my guts. But again, if we're trading Emmanuel Rodriguez, we're getting some nice pieces in return who can immediately help the big club. So those were the 5 guys that I thought really were both, again, marketable. And you could kind of make some conversations around, well, maybe the Twins could survive without this guy. And they're all in the high minors, too, except for Kalen Culpepper. So they would be attractive pieces to another org where it's like you don't have to wait years for this guy. Some of the guys out in my top 10 who I didn't include on this list. So the first one, Walker Jenkins, top dude, basically untouchable for me right now. Walker Jenkins, I'm keeping. And that's not something I say often about anyone. Usually I take that Derek Falvey stance of everybody has a price, but Walker Jenkins, I'm not doing anything with him right now. Charlie Soto and Brandon Winokur, kind of putting these 2 guys together. They were both from the same draft class, both high school guys, both incredibly young, really far away. So again, I think there are some marketability challenges in terms of trying to push them onto another team since they're so far away. Not that other teams wouldn't find them valuable, but they would look at them and be like, in this era where so many teams make the postseason, I think that's going to be a more tough sell these days of, hey, do you want this 20-year-old or whatever who's years and years away? I think a lot of teams are going to be like, nah, we could get someone closer than that, I think. And then I'm going to put 2 more names together, 2, Andrew Morris and Corey Lewis, also in my top 10. Again, 2 guys also from the same draft class, college pitchers drafted. These guys have some upside, but it's limited ceiling compared to like a Raya or a Culpepper. I do think if you're another team and you're acquiring minor league talent and you don't really need them to pop on the scene immediately or be the finalized version of themselves immediately, you have some runway to work with them. I think you would look at Culpepper and Raya and say, we're not sure if these guys are as sure things, but we could see top of the rotation upside with those guys, which it's harder to do that with Morris and Lewis. But I do think there's a good shot at both those guys being back of the rotation starters. So that's why I like them in my list. I think they have a high probability, a little less of a question marks around those guys, in my opinion. So what do you think about all that? Let me know. Should the Twins be trading prospects? It'd be fun if we could just spend POLAD money and just get free agents and keep everybody in-house, but I don't think that's going to be a possibility this winter. So Derek Falvey, if he wants to mix things up, he's going to have to either trade away guys on the current big club or trade away some prospects or a little bit of both, maybe even. It's going to be interesting to see. Lots of potential pathways I could envision, so we'll see how it all unfolds, but let me know what you think about all that, and we'll talk again soon.